Hello and welcome to News Centre. I'm Parikshit Luthra. As the diplomatic rift between India and Canada widens, the Canadian Defence Minister Bill Blair has described the country's relations with India as significant and crucial, reiterating that the Canadian government will continue to pursue partnerships including the Indo-Pacific strategy. However, in a conversation with a local television channel, Blair also said that Canada has a responsibility to make sure they conduct a thorough investigation. Meanwhile, sources have told CNBC-TV18 that the Indian government may cancel registration of overseas citizenship of OCI cardholders that are involved in pro-Khalistani activities. India's National Investigation Agency is also looking to seize properties of fugitive Khalistani terrorists. A report by New York Times has suggested that US officials provided intelligence to Canada that helped the country pose credible allegations against the Indian government. The report has also said that the intercepts were then gathered by the Canadian government. Remember, while the Indian government has halted visa services to Canadian citizens, the Canadian government has not stopped processing visas for Indians as of yet. Let's listen in to Bill Blair. All right. To take this discussion forward, I'm now joined by Ambassador Navdeep Suri, Distinguished Fellow at Observer Research Foundation and former diplomat, Ambassador Veena Sikri as well. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. Ambassador Suri, let me begin by speaking to you about these allegations that have now come in. The US ambassador to Canada confirming that it was Five Eyes intelligence that helped Canada come to this conclusion. How do you think the G7 is going to take this? And does this put India into a difficult situation?
Firstly, Parikshit, it's not a G7 issue. If anything, it's the Five Eyes, which is not the G7. Yes, they do share intelligence. And I would presume that as India, as a country which has a good relationship with 4 of the 5 members of the Five Eyes, they would also share with our intelligence agencies, not the methods, but certainly the outcomes of what they've picked up, so that there is a level of confidence on our side. As of now, we have strenuously denied that they have shared anything substantive with us. And I think we will leave it at that unless they share something that is persuasive. Right now, what you are seeing is a mix of leaks and innuendo and the occasional sort of attributable to sources kind of a report. What is coming out from official journals themselves is fairly scarce in terms of any kind of substance that it might carry.
Right. Ambassador Sikri, how do you see the approach of the Canadian government? After the foreign minister, after Justin Trudeau had made those statements, we see regular reports in the Canadian media about this issue. It seems that the Canadian side wants to pursue this aggressively. To what extent will Canada want to take this? Do you see a way out?
First of all, the credibility of the Canadian government is right now at an all-time low. We've seen, for example, that even in the Canadian Parliament, he's being excoriated. Justin Trudeau is being excoriated by the leader of the opposition, the Conservative Party, and even the Premier of British Columbia, who in fact said that Prime Minister Trudeau had called him before making the statement in Parliament last Monday and had sent the Director of Canadian Intelligence Services to meet him. He said, I got no evidence. I got something that was just on the Google available to everybody. So I think that, the Indian government has been absolutely correct, even if, as a statement made by Justin Trudeau just thrown out last week, even if he says that he gave some information weeks ago, it's clear that the Indian government has examined and rejected this evidence. And that is why last Monday, when Prime Minister Trudeau made his statement in Parliament about credible allegations, who ever heard of that phrase before, after that, the government of India called these absurd and motivated statements and said that we reject any such action by India, we reject any such allegations, and there's no evidence at all. So I think after that, it's clear that the defense minister seems to be trying to recover ground, saying, no, we're going to pursue the relationship with India. I think that Prime Minister Trudeau is in a very difficult situation back home, but India has kept quiet. India is now quiet, meaning clearly they reject any allegation. After the first statement, India India is now quiet. Our foreign minister is in New York. He's going to be in Washington in a day or so. And I think after that, the discussions will continue, and we should not have any doubts in our mind that the Canadian government has done this for their own internal political reasons, and that's backfired on him spectacularly. So I do not see that this will continue. I think the Canadian government is going to try and recover lost ground, and I see the defense minister, the Canadian defense minister's statement in that light.
All right. Let me go across to Ambassador Suri once again. Ambassador Suri, we're now getting reports that the Indian government, the MHA, is actually considering cancelling the registration of certain OCI card holders who are responsible or who were involved in pro-Khalistani protests or pro-Khalistani activities against India. How do you see this move?
I think it's important that the known offenders, the repeat offenders, don't get away scot-free. And if we have video evidence of those who were responsible for attacking the Indian diplomatic missions, desecrating the tricolor, doing some of the other activities that have drawn adverse attention, and I think we are within our legitimate right to cancel or review their OCI cards. Because remember, what the OCI card allows persons of Indian origin living overseas is to come to India without any visa at all. And that means that they can come and go, fund various groups and gangs in India, carry out their nefarious activities, and be still below the radar. So I think it's important that the government sends a clear signal that this is not something that you can get away with any longer. So the decision to review the OCI cards and cancel OCI cards of those, and even the targeting of properties of people like Nijar and Pannu that we have seen in the last 48 hours, should send a message to them that we are now not going to sit back and watch and give them a free ride.
Right. Ambassador Sikri, India had asked the Canadian government for parity in diplomatic strength. The Canadian government was asked that they should have equal number of diplomats as India has in Canada and its consulates. We believe that conversation is still ongoing. The Canadian government or the embassy has not given us a sense of how much the staff has been reduced. But they did confirm that the staff is being readjusted in line with threats that are coming in on social media. Can the Canadian side be forced to reduce diplomats?
No, there's no element of forcing here, but there is certainly a very strong element of parity. And the Indian government is fully within its rights to ask that a certain sense of parity be maintained. That is normal in all diplomatic relations. You do see the embassies of the two sides have some kind of parity in their strength. And it is very unusual to find that the Indian High Commission and the consulates in Canada are much smaller than the whole representation of Canada in India. They have not only the High Commission in Delhi, which is fairly large, they have consulates in 3 or 4 cities, and then they have a number of trade missions in something like 8 cities, which is very, very large and unusual indeed. Now, if Canada were to give so much importance to trade relations between India and Canada, I don't see them doing the kind of doing what they have been doing in the last 1 week and before. We saw that when Prime Minister Trudeau was in India for the G20, he refused to attend the dinner hosted by the President of India. That's something that is really, really unusual and a very, I would say, a lack of sensitivity to your host government and to diplomatic protocol. And then after that, of course, his plane that could not take off, and the Indian government offered him a plane to go back. He said no, and he just stayed in his room for 2 days. So I think, and then of course, after that, he made this big statement in the Canadian Parliament last Monday. So the Indian government is fully within its rights to A, it has correctly rejected all those allegations, and B, in the face of these allegations, which are so serious and completely out of tune with the diplomatic protocol and the very good relations between India and Canada. The government is now going to review what other steps to take. What you discussed about the OCI card is one such very important step. And I fully agree with Ambassador Navdeep Suri with what he said, that, if the Indian people like Panun and others are going to make these absolutely, terrible statements dividing Hindus and Sikhs and saying Hindus leave Canada. He's not even been reprimanded.
Right.
The Canadian government has not even been called. They're still going on their freedom of speech and freedom of conscience, track. So, I mean, it's completely unheard of. So, Indian government is certainly, they've already taken action in confiscating his properties. And many of these people, as even including Nijar, they had cases against them in India. So many cases, so much illegal activity.
Right.
Red corner notices have been issued by some. Certainly against Nijar, there was a red corner notice, but the government of Canada has been ignoring all this. So, if the government of Canada chooses to just ignore the sensitivities of the Indian government, of the Indian people, to ignore what Interpol is saying, then, well, India is fully within its right to take whatever action it deems fit within international law and whatever we like to do.
All right. Ambassador Sikri, we've run out of time, but I'd like to thank you and Ambassador Suri for joining us here on the program. What Bill Blair, the Canadian Defence Minister, has said that, yes, these allegations are important, but they also see the importance of India as a long-term partner in the Indo-Pacific. So let's see how this plays out in the days to come. Ambassador Suri and Veena Sikri, thank you very much for joining us once again. We're taking a short break here on News Center, but coming up, Amazon Web Services has inked a deal with ISRO and InSpace to advance its artificial intelligence capabilities. We bring you a special conversation with the company's head for Asia Pacific, Rahul Sharma, on AWS's expansion plans for India. Stay tuned.